All right, micro students. I apologize for that abrupt ending to the other lecture on perfect competition. I had covered market structures and how the perfectly competitive market model works in the short run. And I was in the process of moving to the long run when I realized there was an error in one of my graphs. So I went to fix it and then lost internet, lost connection. So my video ended abruptly. So I went ahead and posted that for you. So that video lecture does include the market structures in the short run. With this lecture, this is part 2 of the perfect comp story. This is the long run adjustment process. Now, this long run adjustment process occurs because there are no barriers to entry in our perfectly competitive markets. Firms are free to come and go. So when we get to the monopoly lecture, there's only going to be one lecture for the monopoly story. The monopoly story is just a little bit simpler than the perfectly competitive firm because the number of firms involved is a significantly lower amount, just one firm in the monopoly. So when you see that there's only one lecture for the monopoly model, don't be afraid. That's by design. In monopoly models, the long run is exactly the same as the short run because there are significant barriers to entry. And so whatever happens in the short run also persists in the long run because the monopoly has these protections, those barriers to protect them from the competition. So, okay, so let me go to where we left off with the lecture notes for perfect comp. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to share my screen with you. So I think I have it set up. All right, so hopefully now you can see the long run adjustment process is where we are in the notes. So let's assume that our firms are earning either profit or loss. And I presented both scenarios. We're going to walk through both scenarios here, the two possibilities. If we're in macro equilibrium, nothing's going to change. It's going to stay there. That's perfect. Chances of us staying in long run equilibrium, though, are low because there's so much going on in our markets. It's going to move us out of that equilibrium into either a profit or loss scenario. And then the market will adjust. Okay, the market has the mechanisms to adjust itself, doesn't need government to do this, doesn't need any outside intervention. This has the self-correcting mechanism all built in. It will occur over time. And again, no one is saying how long this process is going to take. It could be a very quick adjustment within a matter of weeks or months. It could be a longer adjustment taking years. If it takes a while to build up a factory and to enter this market and to have all the technology and to be able to compete in this market, it could take a while. Think about agriculture, we mentioned, was our example of perfect comp. You have to go out and not only buy the land, but it takes a while for the crops to grow, and you have to make sure that the land is processed and ready to go, and you plant and you fertilize and you grow. So it could take a while until you actually start reaping crops off of that land. So the adjustment process and how long it takes to adjust is really industry specific, depends on the industry and what is normal in terms of getting a new business up and running. Okay. All right. Usually, though, when the exit occurs, that's pretty quick. If firms are flooding out and just shutting their doors and shuttering, and that's it, it's over, that can be pretty quick. If there's losses being earned, firms may be quick to exit. But in terms of entering, there could be a little bit slower process in terms of getting a firm up and running. All right. So let's look at, in the first scenario, this long run adjustment process if the firm is already making profits. So let's look at our model. I know there's a lot going on here, but let's try to focus on the original equilibrium point. The original equilibrium point is shown here with the market on the left. It's the black intersection, the intersection of S1, D1, and denoted by P1 and Q1. That's our starting point. Okay, so at that starting point, we knew that our firms were facing a little d and MR here at the same P1. This P1 continues across, okay, into our firm's cost curve model. Little q, this is the average firm, average Joe Farmer over here, okay? And originally they were at P1. We look for where MR is equal to MC. Where is that intersection of the horizontal MR and the upward sloping MC? It's right here at this gray dot. The first thing you do once you recognize that intersection is come straight down and choose your quantity. The firm is going to choose to produce an optimal quantity in the short run in response to a price of P1 they're going to respond by producing Q1 level of quantity. Okay. And then what does it cost to produce the Q1? You go back up to the ATC, come across, and here's the green ATC is the original ATC. You can see my little note here I penciled in kind of as best I could that P2 and ATC2 are going to be after the adjustment has occurred. So pay attention. Originally, it's red P1, green ATC, and this shaded area in yellow, the hashtagged rectangle right there, is going to denote profit because the price that I'm earning for my cherries is greater than the cost, the average cost of producing those cherries. Okay, so in this case, the firm is just doing their business, producing Q1, collecting P1 from the customers, and they're making a little bit of profit. That profit is going to send a signal to other farmers in the area that also have similar conditions where they could grow cherries. They're going to say, hey, that guy over there is doing pretty good. They're making lots of profits on those cherries over there. We're going to make some cherries. We're going to add that onto our farm, or we're going to switch an area of our farm that's not as profitable over to cherries. We saw this, and I shouldn't be using cherries maybe. Maybe I should be talking about hops production. So in our Eastern Washington, in Washington in general, right, we have the climate and the soil that are very conducive to growing wheat. You guys know that. Wheat, lentils, barley, those kinds of things. Also, our climate is very conducive to hops, which is used for beer. Okay. And so we've seen that with the popularity of craft beer and beer in general, the demand for that going up and up and up, that you can sell our hops really at a nice price and earn a lot of profit. The growing of hops is very profitable. So we've seen farmers that are switching their fields over entirely from lentils and wheat and stuff like that into hops. And just hops is very easy to grow too. It just takes off, I guess, from what I understand. And so that's a response. You see the neighbor guy doing really well, switching his field over to hops. You're going to go, I'm going to switch my field over to hops, right? And that's what happens. And so over here, what you see in the market response is because we have new firms entering, we have new suppliers of hops, right? That supply curve is going to shift to the right. You guys remember supply and demand analysis. Oh my gosh, I've got a little bug flying around here. Sorry about that. And so all the crazy things that go on when I'm Zooming a lecture. And so the supply curve shifts to the right. Basic supply and demand, number of firms increases. That supply curve is and it doesn't just do one big shift, even though I have it as such. It's going to be slowly farmer 1, farmer 2, farmer 3, farmer 4, okay? And it's going to continue to increase until there's no more profits. When everybody's just breaking even, the farmers are going to say, why would I want to go into a new industry and just break even? They're not going to. So that entry is going to stop once we've hit the break even. And where is the break even? Go back to the short run lecture and remember the break even is when that horizontal demand and marginal revenue bumps that tangency with the minimum on the ATC. When it comes across and it hits the bottom of the ATC, that's that break even point. Once we've hit that new price, P2 and ATC2, because they're both at the same place here, that's where we know that this supply curve is going to stop. So when you're drawing this for your homework, for your exams, don't just randomly shift the supply curve to the right. We have to be a little bit more careful because we know exactly how far that supply curve will shift. So notice I drew that blue dot there very carefully to make sure that it lined up with my blue line here, and then I extended it over and I found P2. So in this case, we go from the market, from the individual cost curves break even to the market, okay? When we're gonna show the ultimate final shift, the end of all that entry, will occur at this particular point. So don't just randomly shift your supply curve to the right in this case, like we have done in previous supply and demand. In this case, it's very specific. So take your time, make sure you show how far that supply curve shifts to eliminate all of those economic profits. Once all the economic profits are squeezed out of the market, it'll stabilize, no new firms will come in, okay? And the adjustment process is over at that point. And the result is, in the long run, our perfectly competitive markets will be earning zero economic profit. That's how we know we got to the long run, when we see zero economic profits being earned, okay? All right, so let's go and say, well, does this work the other way? If I had a perfectly competitive market that was earning losses, does this same story work in reverse? And the answer is yes. So let's take a look at this. And again, let's start over here in the market model with the black S1D1, the black intersection denoted P1Q1 is my original price. Bring that across, slap on my red D equals MR here. Now I didn't show it in this picture, but implicitly, because we're earning losses, that means that that price is above the minimum AVC. I didn't show my minimum AVC, perhaps I should have, but just assume that this firm is above the shutdown point, okay? Oh, excuse me. All right, so there, where does the D equal MR? MR cross MC, look at that green dot, comes straight down, right in Q1, and then go straight back up to the ATC, straight across, and you'll notice that the green ATC is above the original P1, and I have shaded in here for you, if you can see, the yellow hash rectangle. That represents the loss. Here I've written it and I have the blue arrow shining down on this rectangle here. Okay, so now we're making losses. What's going to happen next? So the short run outcome, losses. In the long run, because of the losses, some firms, not this firm's sticking it out, right? You can see that. Some firms will exit. Some farmers are going to say, oh, I've got better opportunities, or I'm going to start my retirement early, or whatever. So some firms choose to leave, okay? With that exit over here in the market, you're going to see that supply curve start to go leftward. Less firms, decrease in supply, okay? And again, although I've shown it as a single arrow to the left, that's an oversimplification. It's actually a sequence of small shifts leftward, culminating in the final position of S2. Let's go to our picture. We know that the firms are going to continue to exit, and as they do so, the other firms can raise their prices slightly. That's going to put that upward pressure on price, right? And as they do so, that individual demand, each of the firms that are left now have a bigger market share. Let's say there were 100 firms and 10 of them have left. Now there's only 90 firms. So you make up a bigger portion of the market. Therefore, your demand, individual demand curve is a little bit bigger. Okay. So it goes over here. So you can see that that D equals MR starts shifting up until the blue horizontal D equals MR2 hits that tangency, that minimum on the ATC. That's how far I knew. That's how I knew where to draw the blue line. It's not just random. You don't just haphazardly just draw some blue line above the red line. No, you draw it very carefully so that it touches the bottom of the ATC curve. And then you come across to the market and then you add the P2. I added my blue dot after I had established the minimum on the ATC, then I come across. That's where I know that my big S will stop shifting. This market will stabilize at P2, Q2 because that's the break-even point. All the losses are gone. All the firms in this industry are now earning zero economic profit. That's the only possible outcome in the long run for perfectly competitive firms, okay? And there you go. So the story works on both sides. So at the end of the day, all firms in the long run will be making zero economic profit. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is in the long run, how do we know that perfectly competitive markets are efficient? Because one of the things I said when I introduced the market structures, go back and visit that lecture if you need to, was that perfectly competitive markets are our best example in terms of efficiency. They're our most efficient form of markets. Well, what do we mean by efficiency? So to give you how economists talk about efficiency, there's two criteria, two types of efficiency. And one is what we call allocative efficiency. And allocative efficiency asks the question, is the price that the consumers are paying somewhat resembling the costs of production? Okay, so for example, if a firm is crunching out widgets and it costs them $1 to crunch out the widgets and the customer is paying $10, well, there's something going on. There's like some gouging going on, right? Because the firm, it only cost them $1 to make it and they're getting $10 for it. There's $9 there of kind of inequity, right? On the other hand, if the last unit produced, the marginal cost of that last unit is $1 and the customer is paying $1, then that's pretty efficient. It's being transferred to the customer at approximately cost, right? Kind of idea. So that's allocative. Are we allocating the goods and services efficiently? So there's not a huge markup, okay? And yes, that is the case in perfectly competitive markets because price equals marginal revenue equals marginal cost right here at this intersection, which I didn't draw and bring it down to Q2. Imagine there's a blue Q2 over here to the right. Put the big blue dot here where MC crosses MR2, comes straight down to Q2. At that big blue dot that you're now imagining, right? My price equals my marginal cost. That's where the gray line crosses the blue line, right? So yes, perfectly competitive firms exhibit allocative efficiency. Well, another way to talk about efficiency is the firm producing it at the lowest possible cost? Are they minimizing their cost to the best of their ability? Okay, and that's called productive efficiency. Have they gotten it, have they streamlined so that they're absolutely totally efficient and producing at the lowest possible cost? Well, where on my picture do I see lowest possible costs? At the minimum of the ATC. So the minimum of the ATC is the best place to be. Well, that happens in the long run in perfectly competitive markets because that's where this D equals MR2 comes across and bumps the minimum ATC, right? Right there. So perfectly competitive markets are productively efficient, meaning they're producing at their minimum ATCs. Okay, two reasons why perfectly competitive markets are efficient. We're going to compare this. The point for making this, pointing this out to you now is we're going to revisit this after we've looked at the monopoly scenario and showed you, spoiler alert, monopolies are not efficient. So it'll make more sense when you consider the alternative that monopolies do not have the incentives necessary to achieve allocative efficiency and productive efficiency. Okay, so like I said, this will make more sense after the monopoly lecture, but for now, just know that perfectly competitive firms are both allocatively efficient and productively efficient. This is a good thing and why we like perfectly competitive markets as an economist. Okay, so I'm going to end the perfect comp lecture. I'm going to end this now so I can get it uploaded quickly for you so you can finish that homework. I will be posting one more shorter lecture on the monopoly model. So stay tuned for that. I apologize for the delay. My internet is spotty, but I will do my best to get these uploaded for you in a timely fashion. Keep working hard, guys. I know it's hard. We're at the end of the quarter and we're all getting burned out, but you guys have been working so hard all quarter and I'm so proud of you. Let's just finish strong. All right, I'm cheering for you. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to say goodbye for now and come back and listen to my Monopoly talk.